So good afternoon and welcome to Kitty Talks. This week I have a real treat for you. This gentleman came into my life by a mutual friend, Kerry Steers, and he has been fantastic, actually. He really has helped me work through some stuff. He is a family constellation facilitator, and we're going to go into more detail about what that means in this podcast. He's also a life coach and also a Course in Miracles teacher. So, John Harold Moore, welcome to Kitty Talks. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, Kitty, I am so honored to be here. And really, I know that seems like a cliche, people say that, but when I found out what you're doing with these podcasts, that is right up my alley, just inspiring people to, by having others share their story. So bravo to you, and I'm just really excited to be here.
So I have to tell you, this man has the most beautiful heart, and his energy just shines through everything he does. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I've got goosebumps already. So the team are in action. They're obviously ready. John, I kind of told
Yes, I just got the angel bumps too.
God bumps, they are with us. But John, do you mind sharing? Obviously, I know what family constellation work is now because I've actually experienced it. But would you mind sharing with our audience, like, what this is and a little bit more detail so they can get their heads around it?
Sure. Well, I can't promise they'll be able to get their heads around it. I often tell people it's the hardest part of my job is to explain what the heck family constellations are. But in my nutshell sentence is, it is a powerful healing modality that helps you uncover what you might be carrying for your family, that is these unconscious loyalties we have that and these recurring patterns that keep us from the happy life we were meant to live. So we all know that we can get eye color and hair color, and maybe a good business sense or a love of music can be passed down from our family. But what a lot of people don't know is that you can also have family traumas or pain or uncomfortable or not so beneficial things passed down as well. In the energetic field and the DNA, we can trace it in more of a scientific way, but also in a more energetic way. It's very similar to past life regressions in a way, because we're carrying things with us now that we might not have ever connected the dots, that something that happened to our grandmother when she was 25 could possibly be why our business is struggling. And what Family Constellations does is, because of what we call the knowing field that connects us all, it reveals things that that might be tripping you up now.
And I suppose if I give some context as well, because I was working with John to help my mum, because obviously a lot of you guys know that my mum and our family have mental health issues. And so I chose to work with John around mental health issues because I'm keen not to pass those on to my children, and also drug and alcohol, because that's also something else that runs in my family. And can you just explain, John, because it can work on pretty much anything, can't it? From what I understand, it's
yes. It really does. It can it can help you with a recurring health issue. It can help with business. It can help with your relationships. It can help with your finances and prosperity consciousness. There's really no area that it couldn't be helpful, and I think it can be helpful for everyone. And maybe it would help for me to give an example from my own family. It's an example that's so such classic family constellation. So my grandmother, my mother's mother, she lost her husband in a diving accident when she was pregnant with my mom. So my grandmother was a widow at a young age. And then my father passed away when I was 7 through cancer. And so my mom was a widow at a young age. And I have 3 sisters, and one of my sisters also became a widow at a young age. So here's this pattern that has repeated. And some might say, wow, John, it seems like your family is cursed, or what's this? Why do all these women become widows at young ages? And really, from a family constellations point of view, it is just a pattern that's repeating. I can imagine that my grandmother in 1929, during the Great Depression here in the US, that she was pregnant and baby on the way, her husband dies. What am I going to do? How am I going to support this little girl? There are no jobs there. She probably didn't have a whole lot of time to grieve the passing of her husband, and she just had to toughen up. And my grandma was a very tough lady, and she found a way. But in a way, the reason that we call it family constellations, let me back up a little bit, is just like if you were to go outside tonight and look for a constellation like the Big Dipper or Orion's Belt, and if it was cloudy and one of the stars was covered up by a cloud, you may not recognize the constellation. Well, the same is true in families. If somebody is forgotten or excluded, or it's too painful to talk about them for some reason, the family feels out of balance, like there's something missing. And that was the case with my family. Because we didn't really talk about my grandfather on my mother's side too much, and my grandmother remarried, and that's who I knew as my grandfather. So not that we consciously did it, but in a way, my biological grandfather, was excluded. And that, because the family soul, in constellations, we believe that just like we have a soul, the family has a soul. And the family soul wants 2 things. It wants the family to keep going, and it wants love to keep flowing through the family. So if there's anywhere that the love is blocked, or a movement is not completed, or somebody is forgotten, it tries to find a way to bring them back in. And so unconsciously, we can attract these situations. I'm sure my mother and my sister did not plan to be a widow at a young age, but because of the dynamics of the family, it's almost like saying, see how much I love you, Mom, I'll do the same thing, as a way to be connected. And of course, that's not what somebody would want on a conscious level, but it's always about love underneath everything. So that's the example I like to share, because it's so clear.
Mm. Yeah, so anyone listening, I would have a think and have a look at your own family, because it's fascinating when you actually start to look at your family patterns. Like, I think all of us probably can spot some type of pattern that we have running through our lineage. And the way I look at it, John, is it's almost like you're clearing up your family line, your energetic family line. So it, like you said, it doesn't then repeat going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when we do this work, we are not only benefiting ourselves, but we are benefiting the ancestors behind us and our descendants, our children, our grandchildren. We are getting the love flowing again. It's kind of like when you have a dam and it's blocking a stream, you kind of remove the dam, and then the stream can continue flowing again. So that's what we're doing, is removing the blocks. And I love that in A Course in Miracles, in the introduction to A Course in Miracles, it says that we're here just to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And so when I did my first family constellation, I thought, oh my gosh, this is A Course in Miracles in action. This is principles of oneness and not judging anything that happens, and inclusion. It's, to me, I don't know if everyone that does constellation sees it that way, but for me, it was a real direct correlation. And that's why I fell into it so quickly and so easily. And I fell in love with it because I'd been studying the Course for a long time. And it was like, oh my gosh, we can actually, instead of just talk about it, we can have the experience of it. And that's one of the biggest gifts of family constellation, is you can talk about a situation for 10 years, but when you have an experience in a constellation, either a private session or a group session, it it's something that will stick with you forever. And it's different. It's like, oh, I can move forward with a different picture, with a different story now. And everything changes once we have a different story inside us.
And I can definitely be testament to that, because to explain a little bit more about the actual physical process. So I worked with John at the beginning, and he talked to me about the things that I was looking to clear, and any kind of family history and family pattern and my experience of it. And then how it works is you have 9 people, or you have 9 pieces of paper that represent 9 different things. So they could be family members.
Yes.
Or they could be the things that you're trying to work on. And you place them in the room wherever intuitively feels correct. And as John, have you done this process? You've done this process yourself, so you've been on both sides. But it's pretty interesting because you don't really know what's going on.
Yes, so
yes. John was kind of just directing me and say, just do intuitively what feels
yes.
Right. And so you're kind of, you're standing on a piece of paper and you're saying, well, I feel like this. And I'm thinking, I don't know if this is right, if this is completely bonkers.
Yes.
What's fascinating is when you have the end of the session is the patterns and the people, and it all falls into place. And of course, you then become conscious and aware of what each person or piece of paper represented. And like, for example, in our family, I had, I think it was number 9, which was literally going out the door. And that was joy. And bearing in mind, in our family, we're trying to work on being happier and getting rid of depression. Joy was heading out the door, and we were trying to push it back in.
We don't want joy going out the door.
But absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely fascinating stuff, John. And can you tell our audience, because obviously you also are well schooled in A Course in Miracles. Like, how did that come into your life?
Well, that was definitely one of those God things. Just, it was meant to be. One of the jobs I've had in my crazy roller coaster career was I went to massage school in 2002 in Miami, Educating Hands School of Massage, great school. And one of my classmates, she and I really connected. And once I started on the spiritual path, she told me that I needed to read this book called Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. And I thought, okay, that's great. I already had a stack of, anyone new in the spiritual path knows that you probably got 20 books that people have recommended. And so I added that one to the list. And she was so insistent that I read this book. And then she found out the author was coming to Miami to give a talk on his second book. And she said, John, you have to read this book. And so she gifted me her set of CDs, the audio version of the book. And I listened to it in my car in between massage appointments. And it was like this revelation, this door open in the light. Like, this had answered more of my questions than anything else I'd studied so far. And what I didn't know is that this book was an explanation of A Course in Miracles, just a conversation between 3 people about what the Course is teaching. And to anyone who has opened up the book for the first time, it can be quite intimidating with the languaging and it's the size of it. Yeah, exactly. It's a very big, heavy book, both literally and figuratively, or it can be. And Disappearance of the Universe, they call it the decoder ring for A Course in Miracles. So I listened to that. I went to the talk. I met Gary Renard. And I bought my first copy of the Course maybe a month later after I finished reading his second book. And that was 2006. So I've been studying it for 12 years, and it has just shifted my life in ways I could never have imagined through some really difficult times. It came at the perfect time when I was in a not so healthy relationship. My mom had just come to Florida to live near me, and she was an alcoholic and started drinking again when she came down. So there was a lot of chaos in my life, and I really needed something to help me come back to inner peace despite what was going on in the outside world. And the Course was such a gift. So I will always be grateful to my friend Gwyneth for insisting that I read that book.
How fascinating. And talk to me about how, because obviously it sounds to me like the book found you at the right time. When did you decide?
Yes.
And
Yes.
these things always do. When we're ready, they find us. But talk to me about when you
Yes.
decided then to become a teacher of it.
Well, the course is interesting because I think in life in general, we're all students and teachers. We're all learning all the time and we're all teaching all the time, whether we consider ourselves a teacher or not. Most of us are teaching by examples. You parents out there know that whenever you do something, your kids are watching and they're going to imitate you. So I love teaching by example as best I can. So to be a teacher of the course, it's really a self-study course. It says that also right in the beginning, but it can be complicated. So we come together and in these discussion groups about it. So I use the term teacher loosely. There is actually a section in the course called the Manual for Teachers, but really we're all teachers and students of the course. That those of us that are reading it and studying it, it's not like a course that you do like in college where you do it once and then you're done. You can check that off the list. It really is a way of life. It's a thought system that will help you uh, come back to peace, like I said, despite what's going on in the outer world. And I just loved it so much. And I like, as anyone who has discovered something that really works for them, you want to tell the whole world about it. And so that's when I said, I've got to share this. The same with Family Constellations. As soon as I did my first one, I asked the woman who was facilitating, how do you learn how to do this? And she said, I'm so glad you asked. I'll teach you. And so I immediately started studying to be a facilitator. So that just, like anything, when you love something so much, I couldn't keep it to myself and I wanted to share it with whoever would listen.
And take me back, John, because obviously we kind of jumped into when you were studying massage. But now, when you look back at your life, we mentioned this before we came on air. I always think hindsight
Mhm.
is a wonderful thing. When you look back at the breadcrumbs of your life,
Yes.
can you see that there has been a pattern to it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned breadcrumbs because one of the many things that I did, I was a puppeteer. And the first show I learned was Hansel and Gretel. And so it was all about breadcrumbs. But that puppet show that I did in Washington, D.C. was one of my breadcrumbs. Um, I, as I said, I grew up in upstate New York and had a kind of a chaotic family life. Once my father passed, my mom started drinking. And, I'm so blessed to have the family that I do because when tragedy happens, families, I think either they go their separate ways and they split or they come together really tightly. And mine did the latter. We really, like, I could call any one of my brother or sisters right now and they would be there for me and likewise. So I really feel grateful that I had the family I did, even as crazy and dysfunctional as it was. Um, and so I kind of I'm a lot younger than my siblings, 7 years between my closest sister and I. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. I from a big family, but yet kind of like an only child because they all spoiled me pretty badly. But I do think it's because of the love that they gave me that I can do the work that I do and just be this loving presence as much as I can in the world. And so I went to school for advertising design in Syracuse University. I thought that I wanted to be Darren Stevens from Bewitched. That was my only reference to what being in advertising design was, making commercials and creating ads. But truth be told, I really wanted to be Samantha and not Darren and make magical things happen. So the universe kind of played a trick on me. So I went to Syracuse University for art. And I know one of the reasons I went is they also had a drama program. And halfway through, I decided to take an acting for non-majors class, and I loved it. And so my drama professor helped me audition for the drama department, and I wrote my own monologue based on something that happened with my mom during her heavy drinking days when I was in high school, and I got in. And so when I told my art advisor, she did not try to talk me out of transferring. So I know that was the first like breadcrumb, like to follow my joy instead of doing what I thought I should do, because advertising, there was money in that and I could make a career out of it. And, the chances of becoming a successful actor are not great, but I followed my joy. And that was the first time that taking a leap of faith and following my joy paid off. And that led to, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. and lived with one of my sisters who lived there. And I got a job in the box office at some regional theaters there. And I realized that I was doing very well behind the scenes, and I could have followed the path of theater administration, but I wanted to be on stage or in front of the camera. So that's when I decided I needed to make a change. And I sent out resumes. I went through the phone book. This is before internet and all the resources we have now. And I sent a resume to all the production companies in the DC area. And the only one that responded was Bob Brown Puppets. And I don't know why I sent a resume to them. They asked me, why are you sending a resume to us? But it just sounded like a fun company to work for. So they called me in and I talked with them, and they said that they don't have anything for me right now, but would I like to come and volunteer and just spend some time with them? And these two puppeteers, Bob and Judy Brown, they did the marionettes in Sound of Music, the goat marionettes, and they also were on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and they had some stories. So I just loved spending time with them. And then over the Christmas holiday, that's when we did the Hansel and Gretel show, and they trained me how to be a puppeteer. So I got trained by two of the best puppeteers in the business. And little did I know that a year later, I would be in Orlando, and and my puppeteering skills got me hired at Walt Disney World Resort. So again, seeing the breadcrumbs, I see exactly why I left a full-time job with benefits to work with these crazy puppet people for a 5-week engagement that did not have benefits, but I just knew like there was something in me that knew I had to do that. And so I'm so glad. And that's one of the things I would recommend to all of your listeners is the path doesn't always make sense to your logical mind, but when you follow your joy, when you follow things that light you up, that there are miracles and blessings beyond your wildest dreams. And working for Disney for 7 years in the entertainment department, I was the people that walked around in the Tigger costume and Pluto. And I also got to be John Smith from Pocahontas, and I got to be the prince from Sleeping Beauty. And it was just such, pardon the cliche, it was such a magical time in my life to be part of that experience, to be part of something that everybody on the planet almost, or everyone that has an internet knows about Disney World or wants to go to Disney World. And I can't say enough about that time. It really got me out of my shell, because I was painfully shy before that, even with my degree in acting. So to be able to put on a character head and nobody knew who I was, and dance around and be silly and be crazy, but nobody knew that it was John, was exactly what I needed. I know Spirit knew what it was doing when it had me do that job, because eventually my face had to be showing, and I was in the Christmas parade and we went out the gate and I'm on the castle float standing next to Sleeping Beauty, and there's all these people with cameras. I'm getting those God bumps just talking about it. And it was like, okay, here you are. Don't fall off the float because it'll be really embarrassing. But it definitely prepared me for what I'm doing now, and to be comfortable even doing an interview like this with you, Kitty.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you made that point, because I think following our joy, it is as simple as that. It's like, what I love for our audience to do when they hear these interviews is, if they hear enough people say it, it's almost like it compounds and you believe it.
Yes.
When you follow your joy, it's almost like we have this inner sat nav, and we know when things are off course. Like you said, you just knew that you needed to take that job. You couldn't explain why, and it probably wouldn't make logical sense. And I think that is the other thing, that if we're going to do our dharma and if we're going to live lives that are following our highest excitement, then we have to almost surrender to it, because it's an unfolding adventure. You will not know all of the answers at the beginning of the path. You know, they're shown to you as you go along.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, another example of that, I was ended up when I was in Orlando. I did that for 7 years, and then that became obvious that it was I didn't want to go into supervision of the entertainment department or go into a more administrative role, because I liked playing and being in front of the camera. I'm a Leo after all. So I decided yeah, the call of the ocean and lured me down to South Florida. And one of my best friends from college, who still lives in South Florida, I moved in with him, and I worked for a company that put shows on cruise ships for a while, but that didn't feel like the right fit for me. Again, I was behind the scenes, and I've been thinking about going to massage school because I had always given my mom back rubs and my 3 older sisters, and I was work at Disney when people came out of the costumes, like, oh, my neck is stiff, so I would work on them. And one of my friends said, John, why don't you go to massage school and do this for a living? You do it all the time anyway. And well, there's a brilliant idea. so so I did. I did some research and I found the school. Yeah.
Right under our nose.
And as I said, it turned out to, yeah, exactly. One of my spiritual teachers said, genius is when you see something that's been right in front of you all along and somebody else has to point it out to you. So I went to that massage school, and again, perfectly timed, because I had moved to South Beach, and it's a little bit, if anyone has seen the movie Birdcage, it's a little bit like that. Back in the early 2000s, it was definitely a party scene, and was carrying so much pain for my family that I didn't realize I was carrying, because I hadn't done family constellations yet. That I just wanted to party and do some recreational drugs. And I felt like I was part of a tribe, and I knew all the drag queens, and I could get on the guest list. And I was having a good old time dancing in those clubs until the wee hours of the day, and not thinking about my mom, who was still in the throes of her addiction back in upstate New York. That was the only thing that could get me to be in the present moment. And I see it now as such a gift and a blessing. I mean, I'm so grateful that it didn't grab me like it does so many, and I was able to move past it. But I had a lot of judgment about my partying days back then because of my mom. And here I am judging her for abusing alcohol, and I'm out there doing these other drugs. But I see now that some of the drugs that I was doing helped me to experience that joy that I wasn't able to get to any other way. And I'm so grateful now that I have other ways that I can get to that joy. But again, looking back, I see that that was exactly what I needed to bring me to where I was today. And so that was when I started coming out of that phase, and another not so great relationship that I am, again, so grateful for, because it literally brought me to my knees and said, there has to be another way. Like, what I'm doing right now is not working. And I think that's a place that we all get to in our lives. At some point, we say there's got to be another way. And that's when we start searching for these teachings. And as you said earlier, Kitty, when we're ready, the teacher, the book, the movie, the program, the class appears. And I was definitely ready. And so in 2002, I started going to massage school. And one of my neighbors said, John, I think you should come to church with me. And I said, oh, no, church is not for me. I didn't really grow up with it after my dad passed. We didn't go to church very much, and I didn't really believe in God. I thought, how could there be a God when all these terrible things have happened in my life? My father dies, my favorite grandmother died, my mom is an alcoholic, my dog died. I was convinced that there couldn't be a God. And anyone who believed in God was just didn't know any better, and they didn't have science. That was my sense back then. So when my neighbor told me that he thought I should come to church with him because he was tired of seeing me crying all the time, at that point I was so desperate for another way that I went. And it was a Unity church in Miami, Unity on the Bay. And I walked through that door, and it was like I had come home. It was great music, positive messages. There were other people from the LGBT community there, so there was no ostracizing or you can't come because you're gay and that's not okay with God. It was just very empowering and loving. And so I really credit the Educating Hands and Unity on the Bay to be like that, those two organizations that turned my life 180 degrees. And I started going in a positive direction, and I started loving myself, and I started seeing that there was more going on than meets the eye. And my massage school was a little on the woo-woo side. We talked about crystals and essential oils and energy work, and I learned how to do something called La Ho Chi, which is similar to Reiki. And those 13 classmates I was just felt so held, and there was such love between us. I don't know if there has ever been a class like our class. Maybe every class says that, but they were the perfect people for me to heal and to get, loving touch and to feel supported and to push myself past my boundaries and learn, oh my gosh, all those muscles. At one point, I thought I couldn't possibly learn another muscle, where it begins and where it ends and what it does. But it was that year was so pivotal for me to be and do what I'm doing now. I'll forever, forever be grateful. And I still attend a Unity church here in Houston. So any of your listeners that maybe a traditional church isn't your thing, the Unity movement or Centers for Spiritual Living, both very similar, is such a positive place where to be in community. I think that's a really important thing too, is to have a spiritual community when things go off track or when these challenges happen. To have spiritual community is such a gift. I'm so grateful for that too.
Yeah, I think you've made some really, really valid points there, John. Like, I think as human beings, we need to fit in. Like, that's one of the things that we want a community, whether we're conscious of it or not. And I think sometimes we go looking for that connection in the wrong places. Like, I could relate to your story about where you were saying, you were looking through drugs and alcohol for a connection. Because I think so many of us, when we go through that stage, we know there's something missing, but we're looking for it in the wrong places. And it takes sometimes us to have complete rock bottoms before we start to sort of rebuild in a more positive and healthy way. So no, thank you so much, John. Yeah, really fascinating to hear your story and how you've, followed your breadcrumbs, and then worked on yourself as well to get yourself into a healthy. But I think, all of us have stuff that we bring in this lifetime from this lifetime, from families, so we're all going to be carrying stuff. I think it's a commitment that we have to make, that this is a life commitment that we've really got to make, that to learn and grow and to work through our stuff. And then it becomes a lot easier to be, I think, above the veil, like otherwise we're in a too lower vibration almost to be able to see what's available for us.
Yes, I was just reading a section in the course the other day. It's called Above the Battleground. And it talks about when we're on the battlefield and we're dodging bullets, in the everyday life, and we're all so caught up in it and hiding behind trees, there's no way for you to find peace. But when you rise above the battleground and you can see it from a bigger picture, become the observer, see that everything is happening for you, not to you, even if it doesn't look like it at the time. Like in my case, I can see how growing up with an alcoholic mother and all the chaos that brought me to where I am today, to be a spiritual seeker, So, but I had to rise above the battleground, become the observer. And I love when we are aware, we can never go back. Like, oh, I think that one of the things I share with my coaching clients all the time is awareness equals choice. Like, if I'm not aware that this is a destructive pattern, or if I'm not aware that I'm carrying pain from my mom, or I'm not aware, then I can't do anything about it. But once I have the awareness, I can do something about it.
And I think that's a very valid point. And I think anyone listening to this, it's about how you feel. Like, if your days are filled 80, 90, 100% with joy, then you sound like to me like you're on the right path. But if you literally are heavy every day and you don't necessarily enjoy life, and you feel inside that it's not the right path, then that's your first signpost that you need to look at something and look at what's happening in your life, and look at the areas that you could essentially refine and take responsibility for. Because I think you're so right, John. When we take responsibility, we get our power back.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, it's a bitter pill to swallow sometimes when we learn that we are 100% responsible for everything that happens to us. So it's the good news and the bad news, because we are 100% responsible, we can do something about it. But it's the bad news when you think, wait a minute, why would I create that? Or that's not what I want. But when we see that's one of the beautiful things about family constellations as well, is I like to think of it like a slide projector, and it's like taking out the old slide and putting in a new one, so that what you project out into your world is a much happier picture than the one that you were carrying. Like, oh, my family, I wish my mom didn't drink, and my other friends didn't have to do laundry when they were 10 years old, or worry about where they were going to get dinner. And that story is a very disempowering story. And when I can take out that old slide, that poor me, I'm a victim, and why is this happening to me, and put in this new slide that it happened for a reason. Like, I had this journey with my mom. I can tell you that the arc of how I think my mom and I signed up for the advanced class on unconditional love, because I was always wanting her to be different. I was always wanting her to not drink or not smoke. And she would have loved for me to, she came to accept me being gay eventually, or actually pretty quickly. But of course she wanted grandkids, and she was worried that I wouldn't be happy, or that something would happen to me. But we eventually got there. And one thing I can also recommend to your listeners is this amazing CD called Graceful Passages. It was created by Gary Malkin and Michael Stillwater, and it's a companion to the end of life. So anyone who is a caregiver for someone towards the end of their life, or just something to have in your toolbox, it's a CD where they interviewed these wisdom keepers and what they would tell their grandchildren if they knew they were dying. And they edited the interview down to like the best 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then Gary Malkin he's a film score composer, so he composed music underneath it. And one of my friends gifted me this towards the end of my mom's life. And I listened to that CD with her. She was unconscious at the time, but I held her hand and we listened to that CD together. I asked the hospice nurse to give us some privacy, and I cried my eyes out for about 45 minutes listening to the beautiful words and beautiful music. It's such a gift from Source. And during that hour, something happened. It shifted from my head to my heart. Like, in my head, I knew everything happened for a reason, and I knew everything was exactly as it needed to be for me to be where I am, but it hadn't dropped into my heart yet. And after that, it completely dropped into my heart. My heart was wide open, and I knew, and I thanked my mom. I said, I thank you, Mom. You were the perfect mom for me. And I 100% meant it. That everything that happened, the good, the bad, the ugly, I mean, I get my sense of humor from my mom. She could make a joke out of anything, anything, anything. And I'm so grateful. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that she was the right and perfect mom for me. And I don't know if I could have said that and really meant it completely until that moment. And that's one thing I would offer also is I've learned during doing these family constellations for the past 6 or 7 years is that our heart is either open or closed. It can't be open to some people and closed to some others. And it's perfectly understandable that we might have to put a protective shell around our heart just to carry on and to protect ourselves. But at some point, all of us need to eventually start melting that shell so that the love can come out, because it's hard for love to move back and forth if there's a protective coating around the heart. So once we open our heart completely, then the love just flows in and out effortlessly, just like you and I breathing. And it makes such a difference when I got that. That was one of the big aha moments I got from doing family constellations work.
Mm. Yes, and I definitely would echo that. I think, I had to work really hard to basically get into my emotions and to open my heart to life. I think you're right. I think sometimes, depending on what's happened to us when we're younger, we put this protective shield around us so we don't feel we can't get hurt. But actually, we also can't feel the joy of life and we can't be connected to what's happening. So I think if you're listening to this and you feel like that could be you, that you're slightly dead to life and that you are disconnected, then there's definitely some work for you to do there. And, definitely family constellation work could be something that could help you and help you. Because I think the real beauty of life is in the feeling, like that's been my journey, John. Like only, I would say, the last 10 years, I've really been connected to my feelings and my emotions. And, life is so much better when you're in that space.
Yes, yes. And it really is just about allowing, like, how much joy are we able to allow into our lives? Because there is no limit to it. And if I don't feel worthy, if I feel like inherently there's something wrong with me, then I'm not going to allow a wonderful relationship into my life, or I'm going to have a job where I'm not respected, or my opinion isn't taken into consideration, or I'm going to create these situations where unconsciously, and I'm not saying it's not always on a conscious level. Mostly it's part of our consciousness that we can't access directly, but we unconsciously create these situations to get our needs met, or to create situations where we want to be punished because we feel like we've done something wrong. And that's one of the main tenets of A Course in Miracles is our unconscious guilt for somehow feeling like we could be separate from our source has created all these experiences where we have, car accidents or health challenges or abusive relationships, and the antidote to everything is love. Just what would love do in this situation? Or remembering that I am love, that I am light, that I didn't do anything wrong. I couldn't possibly be separated from my source or anyone else. And that is not always easy to remember, because things happen and they distract us and these things come up. And that's exactly, the ego is very tricky. It's like an illusionist, smoke and mirrors, like, look over here, don't look at the truth, look over here at what these horrible things that are happening on the news. But don't look at this wonderful flower that's right in front of you, or don't look at the person that's opening their arms out to give you a hug. It tries to distract us into something else. So that's one of the beautiful teachings of the Course, is to remember who we really are, is just the love and light that we are.
Beautiful. Oh, John, thank you so much for coming on Kitty Talks. I know that people listening will have found real meaning actually in your life journey and be able to see themselves and parallels between their life and what's happened in yours. So no, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being so open and vulnerable and honest about your journey.
Oh, thank you, Kitty. It really has been a great joy. When you asked me to be on, I was like, yes, yes, yes. Everything in my being said yes. So I'm really glad to have had this opportunity and to share my journey, because it's an interesting one, but not really that different from anybody else's. We're all doing the best we can with what we know. And I'm hoping and trusting that something that we've shared here today has given somebody something that they can carry forward and have a different experience of life and have more miracles and joy.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, follow that joy, do it earlier than we did, learn from our mistakes. But we will have all of John's details in the show notes. So we'll put his website, his contact details, his Instagram, all in the show notes. So you'll be able to connect with him there. But John, thank you once again. And we will see you next week with another amazing guest on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye.
This podcast was sponsored by my Do Your Dharma course. Create a life so good that you pinch yourself. This 8-week online course demystifies Dharma and shows you how to tune in to why you're really here. Go to www.kittytalks.com/do your Dharma.